Everyone, welcome. We're going to get started here. If I can have you take a seat, and feel free, there are seats in the front row still, so fill in as much as you can. Okay, great. I'd like to introduce our gracious host, Dean Jon Gould of the School of Social Ecology.
Good morning, everyone. And as Ash said, please come sit down in front. You are all like our students. You want to stand in the back, but please come down in front. I want to, on behalf of the University of California, Irvine, I want to welcome you all here today. Ash mentioned that I am the Dean of the School of Social Ecology, and the first question I always get from people is, what is social ecology? Well, social ecology is a group of scholars who not only study social problems, we also try to help solve them. And one of the most important problems facing all of Southern California in general, and frankly, a lot of America, is how we handle precious resources, and water is one of the most important. So we are absolutely delighted that you are all here today, and we think of it as a special honor that Senator Min would think to bring this event here on campus. Senator Min is a great friend to UCI. We think of him as clearly one of the family, and indeed, his wife Jane Stover is one of our family as a faculty member in the School of Law. So it is our absolute pleasure, Senator, to have you here today. We appreciate the panel that is here. And Senator, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you to UC Irvine for hosting this event for us. My name is Dave Min, and I have the privilege of representing 37th Senate District in the Senate, which includes Irvine, where I used to be a professor. And I'll just repeat what was said before. You guys should come up to the front. I used to be a law professor, and we used to call on the people in the back. I've been known to cold call. But I also represent the cities of Costa Mesa, Laguna Beach, Newport Beach, Huntington Beach, Orange, Lake Forest, Laguna Woods, Anaheim Hills, Tustin, Costa Mesa, and some others. And as Dean Gould mentioned, water is a crucial issue for our communities, but also really for California as a whole. Also want to thank Assistant Vice Chancellor Alberto Sandoval. Where are you, Alberto? Thank you. Yeah, appreciate your supporting this effort as well. And so we're here today to talk about something that I think often gets ignored or underemphasized in the media, in a lot of discussions that we have around the environment or around public policy, but which we know is going to be a huge issue going forward, and that is the issue of water. Now, it's not maybe the sexiest issue in the world, but the fights, the challenge that we're facing over water usage, water conservation are going to be fights that I think will be more exacerbated and more intense as water shortages continue to accumulate as a result of climate change. And so we are fortunate here in Orange County to have a wealth of expertise and cutting-edge water districts that are doing amazing things. I remember the first time I visited the duck ponds and learned that they were actually, there's an elaborate water filtration system. And I was like, my mind was blown. This is an amazing place to see birds, an amazing place to take a hike, but also a really innovative water filtration system. And so we have lots of innovations like that, including the largest groundwater replenishment system here in Orange County in Fountain Valley, which I had the privilege of touring a few months back, as well as man-made wetlands that I mentioned, the San Joaquin Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary, and others. A lot of ingenuity at work here. I think we have some amazing panelists here, and I just want to take a moment to introduce them as well. Their insights are going to be invaluable as we move on. I'm a politician at the end of the day. I come from a banking and economics background. I don't have any expertise in water, but I have the privilege of chairing the Natural Resources and Water Committee. And last year we saw a lot of water issues come forward with the massive flooding, massive rainfall that we have. And we know that cycle of boom-bust is going to be with us for the foreseeable future here in California and elsewhere. So California built on water, and this is a really important topic. So our forum today is going to focus on 4 pivotal topics. Drought preparedness and management, addressing water infrastructure past, present, and future. Our third panel or discussion will be on the urban ecosystem and environmental health. And our final panel will be on environmental legislation and the upcoming climate bond, which I know is a topic of great interest to many of you. As someone who cares deeply about the environment, I am committed to protecting and nurturing our natural world, and this commitment obviously includes water management. It's about balancing our current needs with the needs of future generations. And that's something I think that often gets lost in the debate over water, is the decisions that we make now, both on water infrastructure but also on water consumption, will have massive impacts for our future progeny. And so the goal of any debate over water has to be to address the challenges not just of today and the here and now, but also for the challenges of tomorrow. We've got a long road ahead of us, but I think panels like these, roundtables like these, hopefully will continue to steer the policy discussions over water into a productive and thoughtful place. And I am thankful again to our panelists for their expertise and lending their time and wisdom to this discussion. And so I wanted to introduce our 4 panelists here today. First, we have Director Megan U. Schneider, Board President of MODOC, the Municipal Water District of Orange County. Director Schneider, please, if you don't mind saying a few words about yourself and introducing yourself. Thank you for joining us.
Paul volunteered to introduce me.
I thought I could.
Good morning, everyone. Really excited to be here and spend some time with you all. As many of you know, UCI is a place that's very near and dear to my heart. We have really long degree names, so I got my bachelor's in chemical engineering with a specialization in environmental engineering, and my master's in engineering with a concentration in environmental engineering here at our beautiful campus. And so I'm really grateful to be back in this space. And as Senator Min mentioned, I'm currently president of the board for the Municipal Water District of Orange County. I've been elected to the board for the last 2 terms, and I'm born and raised in Southern California. Have lived in Orange County for pretty much my entire life. And so water is something that's very near and dear to my heart. It's something that I grew up swimming in and playing in all the time, hence my high school nickname of the Water Maiden. And you learned something new. And you know, it's where I plan to live for hopefully the rest of my life. And so being careful stewards of the environment of our community and public health is something that I'm extremely passionate about. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And as mentioned, I've grown up in this industry, spent the last 17 plus years working in for this industry and for our community, and look forward to spending the rest of my life doing that. So thank you.
Thank you, Manny. Really appreciate that. Next up, we have Paul Cook, General Manager of the Irvine Ranch Water District. Paul, if you can introduce yourself.
Thanks, Senator. Yes, you could, Megan. You could. So I'll jump. This is clearly the anteater side of the table. So I have my undergraduate degree in civil engineering and a master's in civil, but my MBA is from UCI in 2002. I'm a civil engineer, registered civil engineer, and I've been managing the Irvine Ranch Water District since 2011. And it's been just really the ultimate job for myself. I come from a construction background. Thought I'd give public service a try for a couple of years, starting in 1993. It's working out okay so far, but it's really something that's gratifying. I had a candidate come in for a job interview and told me how he wanted to leave private sector because he wanted to get back to the community. And I had this sort of almost blushing moment where that's exactly how I feel about this. And not only the community that I live in, just live up around the corner, I serve it, but like Megan said, with the water and the passion that I know we all have here for water, and many of you in the audience as well. It's thrilling, it's exciting, it's exhausting at times, and it's challenging for an engineer to be, have to talk to other people, in general. But I think especially when we realized how personal water is. We all need it, we all use it, we all have opinions about it, but it's a very complicated subject. So it's really been incumbent on how we speak about it, and how we engage on it, and that's been a growing moment for me in the past few years of being the manager of the water district. So anyway, I look forward to the panel discussion and talking to the other panelists and Senator. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate having you here today. Next up, we have the Director of Water UCI, David Feldman.
Good morning, everyone. Pleasure and honor to be with you this morning, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you might know, in addition to being a professor of urban planning and public policy and science, Director of Water UCI, I have my degree in political science. I remember how enthused I was when I first came home from college and told my parents that I was going to major in political science. My dad looked at me and said, "That's not really a science, is it?" But be that as it may, I've gone on to a career working in water and environmental policy. It's been my privilege to have wonderful students to work with. I want to just say a little bit about Water UCI and the privilege we've had working with the community here in Orange County and throughout Southern California. We began about 8 years ago as an initiative started by the university's provost. The condition was that after 3 years, we would be able to obtain external funding to support our efforts from the state, foundations, various water agencies. We've been blessed by the fact that we've worked with many of the water agencies here in Orange County and throughout Southern California on important issues. But what I often say when people ask what our vision is, I say that within a 100-mile radius of Irvine, you can identify basically the entire panorama of the world's water problems. The good news is, within that same radius, you can identify the organizations and institutions that have the capacity, the knowledge, and the commitment to solve those problems. Bring them together in a dialogue, you can actually transform not just California, but the world. That's been our vision and our mission. I think we're starting to make some inroads in that area, thanks to our partnerships with water agencies, state agencies, and others. And it's just a great privilege to be here and to serve with this panel, and I'm looking forward to our conversation this morning.
Thank you, Professor Feldman. Last but certainly not least is Catherine Moore, Chief Consultant to the Senate Resources and Water Committee. And what I just say is, if you ever watch anything that I say up in Sacramento related to natural resources and water, and by the way, I should just say I have no doubts that none of you actually watch that, because no one does. If I ever say anything that sounds at all erudite, it's because of my amazing staff, including Catherine Moore, who is a true blessing for me, a substantive policy expert on a huge range of subjects. So, Catherine, with those words in mind, please introduce yourself and dazzle everyone with your brilliance.
I don't even know how to begin to follow that. But maybe can you come home to my house for Thanksgiving and tell my family I actually do something worthwhile for them? So again, my name is Catherine Moore. I am also an engineer by training, including civil and environmental engineering. I went to the legislature as a science and technology policy fellow in the fall of 2009. I was placed in the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee with then Chair Frank Pavley, and they actually haven't been able to get rid of me since. I work mostly on natural resources issue, but also do some water work. I'm very pleased to be here in Southern California again for this panel. I do think I had a little bit of an in on getting an invitation, but again, very pleased to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that. Before we start our first panel, I just wanted to recognize a few people here today. We have a number of VIPs, so I don't think we can mention anyone who has an official title, just because there's too many of you. But I will just say that there are a lot of luminaries here. I really appreciate you being here. Did also want to recognize the electeds in the room. So Randall Crane, director from MWDOC. Randall. Also a neighbor of mine. We have representatives here from the office of Katie Porter, Congresswoman Katie Porter. If you don't mind standing up and introducing yourself. Thank you. The office of Orange County Supervisor Katrina Foley. The office of Irvine City Councilwoman Tammy Kim. And then I know we have a lot of people here from UCI in the house. If you guys don't mind standing up so we can recognize you as well. Zot. Okay, nobody, huh? Okay, fantastic. Well, with that, let's kick off our first panel. And this one is on drought preparedness and management. And obviously, here in Orange County, we know what drought looks like. And we're going to obviously have to prepare for that more and more as the effects of climate change are hitting us faster than expected. I think we need to figure out proactively how we devise strategies for water management, as well as consumption. And I think that this is a crucial topic that's particularly germane to the OC. So Megan, I had a question for you. As we start to navigate the increasingly severe challenges posed by climate change, drought preparedness and management are at the forefront of our efforts to ensure a sustainable water future for California. And so the Municipal Water District of Orange County that you represent has been instrumental in advancing a lot of innovative and data-driven approaches to water conservation. I was hoping that you could elaborate on some of those, and you and I talked before this panel about some of the trade-offs that you think about, including around affordability, sustainability, and equity, and was hoping that you could elaborate on that as well. What are you doing, in short, to try to strengthen our resilience against drought, the droughts that we know are going to be more and more frequent and severe, and how are you approaching that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator Min, and there's a lot in that question, so I will try to unpack it in my response. In terms of the Municipal Water District of Orange County, we are the regional wholesaler for our imported water supplies, and we take quite a role in orchestrating and implementing our regional planning for the community. And so, as we all know, we need water to live and survive, and water flows downhill. And so water doesn't know the same boundaries that we know in terms of our districts and cities and different communities that we have. And so really taking a regional look at the water supply and really focusing on when we need it and where we need it is very critical. And so taking a look at the diverse community that we serve, we have member agencies that serve a few hundred connections, all the way to member agencies and cities that serve hundreds of thousands of connections, as well as private water systems as well. And so it's really about understanding all of the diverse local needs that exist. We also have part of our county that's Irvine and North that has access to a very robust and world-famous groundwater basin that's managed by Orange County Water District, as well as a community in South Orange County where we're very, very predominantly dependent on imported water supplies because we do not have access to the same robust groundwater system. Our groundwater happens to be an underground creek that also is heavily impacted by iron and manganese. And so even within a county like Orange County, we have a lot of diverse requirements and needs, and so we rely very heavily on studies to help us make data-driven and informed decisions, and we rely very heavily on water resources planners and engineers to help us look at the trends and learn from the history, but also adjust to the constant that is change. And as we can recognize, especially over the last decade or so, I think we've become a little bit more conversant in the fact that droughts are not something we should be surprised by. We are always going into or coming out of a drought and in anticipation of the next drought. And as climate change has shown us, our weather systems can be very extreme, and being able to capture the water when we get it so that we can use it when we need it and where we need it is challenging. Doing it in a way that's affordable and building up our local water supplies is also challenging. And as I was mentioning to Senator Min, even from a water quality standpoint, our technology has gotten so good that we can now evaluate emerging contaminants at the parts per trillion level. And so we're talking about less than a drop in an entire swimming pool, and being able to detect at levels that we haven't been able to before. And so all of that costs money. All of that requires investments into infrastructure. All of that requires a slew of studies, and all of that requires a lot of collaboration. And so one of the studies that we're very proud of is the Orange County Water Reliability Study. And we've started that in 2016 and have now gone through multiple iterations of updating that study. And what that study does is it looks at both the system and supply reliability needs in our community. And so from a system reliability standpoint, for example, if we have a massive earthquake that may disrupt our imported water supply, what happens? And not just from a holistic what happens to Orange County, but what happens to every segment of Orange County. Who can actually access water? How many days of storage do they have? And where can they have emergency access to that water? And so oftentimes we like to think of water from a holistic, okay, more is better and more will help us be more reliable. But in reality, it depends on where and how you can get it to where you need it to go. Because we've gotten very sophisticated in the water industry. We can transfer water via paper. that doesn't serve you very well in an emergency situation if you can't actually access that physical drop of water. And so our study takes a look at that from a very detailed perspective. And then from a supply reliability standpoint, that's where we're thinking about the supply itself. How much can we get, where, and then we think about where can we bring it to where it's needed. So that's one study that, in fact, has gotten recognition by the State Water Resources Control Board, as well as the California Coastkeeper, because there is an effort there to provide a data-driven and scientific perspective as to our system and supply reliability. To complement that, we've also done an economic study where we're looking at the economic impact to our local community and our businesses around what is the cost of inaction and what are the cost impacts of some of these local and regional water supply projects that we're looking at, and how will that create an economic impact due to the water supply or system shortages that we may face. And then on top of all of that, we also have a very robust water use efficiency group that actually leads some of the most cutting edge research in the state, where we can then provide numbers, not only in the sense of how much water use efficiency can we achieve, but also how much will it cost, and what are the investments that we need to make in terms of water use efficiency and the benefits that we can reap from that. And when we talk about water use efficiency programs, it's everything from our outdoor irrigation programs. We just recently completed a study with Flume looking at residential leaks, all the way to, you know, what types of turf, what types of landscape, what types of plant material, as well as studies on drip irrigation, smart controllers, and you name it. And so we have actually been able to provide data and numbers to the state around what are some of the policy measures and how can they be implemented and how will they influence moving the needle in terms of water use efficiency. And so to that point, it really helps us balance how can we make the most sustainable and reliable decisions, but also maintaining affordability for all, not only in Orange County, but across the state, so that we can continue to make sure that water is affordable and that there's equitable access to affordable water.
Wow, that's very, very impressive. Soup to nuts, and it sounds like you might have some good ideas for I don't know, legislators who might be interested in introducing legislation in this area.
We're always happy to chat.
Fantastic. I just wanted to open this up to the other panelists to see if you had any responses. And I guess I just wanted to add on something either for Megan or anyone else, but you know, we're expecting another wet winter this winter with El Nino, and you know, how do we do a better job of storing that this year, where we know the infrastructure that we're planning may not be enough, but you know, as well as going forward.
Yeah, and I think we're very creative here, especially in Orange County, and so we have a number of rubber dams that allow us to capture some of that water. There's also a pretty common practice where we actually take the first flush of any storm event, because that first flush has a lot of nasty stuff in it, because it's washing off all the dog poop and all the oil on the streets and all of that, and we actually divert that to our wastewater treatment plants. And in Orange County, we just recently calculated it in response to a conservation as a way of life response letter. We've recycled 90% of our water here in Orange County. And so all of that first flush activity, all of that stormwater capture at the wastewater treatment plants, 90% of that gets reused and recycled as part of our local water supply. And so there are a lot of creative efforts to capture that water. And I always remind people, stormwater is one of those things where we see a lot of it because you feel it, you see it, you experience it. but it happens very quickly, and we always have to counter that with flooding. And there are communities in Orange County where just a little bit more rain than normal does lead to flooding. And so obviously the first goal is always to prevent flooding, but the second goal is to capture that stormwater in as many ways as we can.
Thank you, Megan. Anyone else? Paul, you look like you.
Yeah, one small point Megan made, which is actually a really big point. We'll talk a lot about the quantity of water. You can have all the water in the world if it's not the right quality. When she talked about, she was raised by water quality chemists, so I know why she brought that up, she has to. But it's a really important point to make too. So as you think about water in California, think about the quantity, think about the quality as well too. So I think we'll probably talk mostly about quantity today. But I will correct you, water doesn't flow downhill. Water flows uphill if you wave money towards it, it'll actually go uphill. So just to follow on some of the data-driven aspects of what we're doing, Megan talked a lot about the regional and statewide. More locally, IRWD, we're using weather stations. We have a service area that goes from the ocean all the way up into the hills. So we've really got 3 distinct weather areas, and because of how we set up our rate structure, the goal of our rate structure is to allow our customers to have access to the most affordable water they possibly can within a budget. Part of that budget is don't waste your water. Part of not wasting water is not watering too much. So how do we tell our customers how much they should get? We use our weather stations. So it's data-driven validation of an allocation of water that we set for each of our customers, and it works very well. We have very high customer service approval ratings, and about 80%, 80 to 83% of our customers remain within their budget. A few drift in and drift out along the way. But again, it's very data-driven between the weather stations and our rate structure to help encourage our customers to simply be efficient. We're not telling them you can't do this, you can't do that. Because if they do this or that, and this or that includes wasting water, they're just going to pay a lot more for it. That tends to discourage most people, and that's a good signal as far as we're concerned.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much. And just so that you know, we're going to have a good amount of audience Q&A. So if you want to save your questions starting around noon, we'll open it up to the audience. But thank you, Paul. Thank you, Megan, for that discussion. Next topic we have is addressing water infrastructure, past, present, and future. And so our state water infrastructure was largely put in place about a century ago. And much of it, I think one is a testament to the foresight of our predecessors, but at the same time, I think like a lot in America, is also a testament to really the abandonment of infrastructure upgrades over that same period of time. And so it is, I think there's a growing consensus that this is the time where we need to upgrade and modernize our water infrastructure. And so with that, Paul, I want to jump to you. I know IRWD is a recognized leader globally, and I do mean that globally, that when I've had people from around the world come and tell me that Irvine Ranch Water District, as well as other water districts in Orange County, are really on the cutting edge. But with some components of our state's water infrastructure dating back over a century at this point, we have huge challenges in modernizing and adapting our water system here in the state for the new climate realities that we're going to be facing in significant ways. And so want to just ask you, what are some of the strategies and initiatives that you think we need to deploy both locally and at the state level to prepare for the future? And what is IRWD doing to enhance water reliability and enhance efficiency? Finally, what lessons can we learn from the past as we plan ahead for a sustainable and resilient water infrastructure future?
Great, thanks. And that 100-mile radius thing, by the way, why don't you cut that down to about 2 miles and we're good. Think about it. So, yeah. So California's always had this climate extreme, always. The term whiplash has come up recently, and I love it because you can kind of put. I used to do this thing with my hands, and it's like, extreme drought, extreme wet. But whiplash really captures it. The counterbalance of that condition has been the fact that water agencies throughout the state, like Dave said, our predecessors, we've put in place this infrastructure. We've done a really good job, we the water industry, including all of our predecessors, at quietly doing our job, consistently providing great quality water in a quantity where folks didn't have to think about it. Until recently, really, until a really bad drought comes along, and wait 6 months, and then they all forget the last drought once it's over. But we build off of that. The infrastructure that was built back in the 60s primarily assumed there'd always be this wonderful reservoir up in the mountains called the snowpack. Well, that's changing. A lot of the things are changing. So whether it rains a lot like it did last year, whether it rains very, very little like it did the previous year, but if you recall, probably not because you're not water geeks like us, but the first month of last year, December, it rained every day, pretty much. It poured, we're like, it's gonna be a great year. And then it just, somebody turned off the spigot for the next, 9 months, and then it started raining like crazy. Even in that 1 month period, we were losing water to the ocean in a way that could have been captured and preserved. So you have these more extreme events that just, again, make us think, what can we do to accommodate those conditions, knowing that things are going to be different going forward. There's also, to kind of move along past our quiet competency of just doing our job, we in the water industry were very motivated to speak of the urgency. We need to do something now. We should have done something yesterday or the day before yesterday, but we really need to now be doing things because we can come up with a great idea for underground storage or whatever. It's going to take years, if not decades, to implement improvements that will benefit probably not us, but maybe our kids or grandkids. So there is an urgency that we need to communicate. So what is water reliance, or water resilience rather, in California? Because I think that's understanding what water resilience really is will allow for a much better conversation. And it's really water resource management that factors in infrastructure improvements. It factors in being flexible how we operate things, and you'll hear some examples I'll give of operations that are kind of easy to do because we're not building a whole new dam, we're building a whole new canal, we're just changing how we operate things. And then policies and regulations that need to be updated for where we are today. So again, one of the first examples I'll do that's pretty easy to get to visualize is weather forecasting to operate storage. So maybe you've heard about FIRO. That's forecast informed reservoir operations. And my friends from Orange County Water District are here, and they collaborate with the Army Corps of Engineers. Army Corps manages the flood protection operations along the Santa Ana River. You don't have to go too far back in time to see some pretty horrific floods in Orange County, 1938, 1969. These are all built into our memories. And so the Corps, Army Corps, their first job is flood control. As Megan said, flood has got to be taken care of first. But Orange County Water District does a great job working with the Corps. When the Corps starts releasing water, they'll divert that water, Orange County water, into recharge ponds. Sometimes, there are times when you look up in the sky and you go, it's blue skies, but you're still letting all the water rush out of there. Can you please hold it? Oh, there might be a storm in 3 weeks. There might be a storm next week. We're not sure, but we gotta let this go because that's what our dam manual says. So it's saying, well, but here's the actual atmospheric river study, data-based FIRO information. Could you please hold the water a little bit longer so Orange County Water District can finish recharging what we already have, and then move along. So it's little things like that where you're sitting in a congressman's office asking the congressman to please change the regulations because the Army Corps has no interest in this. But actually, it's becoming more common knowledge that this is actually a very easy thing to do. One of countless, well not countless, but maybe dozens of examples up and down the state where FIRO, forecast informed reservoir operations, would really help maximizing our use of wet weather flows, really for all customers in the state of California. A lot of our facilities, whether it's reservoirs or conveyance facilities, I use the term conveyance, it's the canals, it's the pipes, it's other things, but a lot of these facilities have lost capacity. The conveyance facilities, for example, I'm sure we've all driven up the 5 at some point in our lives through the Central Valley of California. If you haven't, I recommend it. If you look off to whichever side of the left, you'll see a large concrete river, state water project. That's just, again, one of many. On the other side of the valley is the federal project, Kern Frank Canal. It is, both of those facilities are resource reduced or flow reduced because of settlement, subsidence. You've heard of subsidence, particularly in that part of the state. So much water has been pumped out of the ground. The entire geological structure has shrunken a little bit to where it's actually lower. When those canals were built, they were built with a plan that water would flow that way. Well, now there's little dips. That's a problem. We need to put the money in to replace and upgrade those facilities to restore their capacity. Other examples are storage. Existing storage facilities that are being operated at lower levels.
I know Santa Clara Valley Water Agency, they've actually taken one of their large facilities offline completely. They're going to tear it down and rebuild it. Irvine Ranch Water District, we have Irvine Lake that we're responsible for with our friends at Serrano Water District. Some are looking for Jerry's hat in the audience. There it is. So we operate that project together. That facility, we were releasing water in the middle of October. We had to release that water because we know the rains are coming. The Division of Safety of Dams knows the rains are coming. And they want the water levels not here, they want them here. Because the dam's okay, but other facilities like the spillway and the outlet tower are not okay. They're 100 years old. And we're in the middle of a design of a project. We're actually about pushing 90% complete on the design of a project to reconstruct the spillway, reconstruct the outlet tower. But again, one of more than dozens of dams across the state that are being operated lower than they could be. That's capacity that you can just look at and go, why can't that thing be full? And we've got actually a couple of questions from the community. Why are you releasing water in the middle of October? That's why. Let's see, what are my other good examples? Expanding water recycling and reuse, that's an easy one. Expanding water efficiency, that's a no-brainer also. Emergency supplies, so if I do that thing with my hands, which I'll probably never get away from, they'll always have that issue where it's a little bit drier than you actually planned on it being. That's okay, that little bit of extra dry, and it could be a little bit extra because there's an emergency, an earthquake in the San Joaquin Delta. An earthquake in the San Joaquin Delta has the potential to destroy some of the levees that have been built up there, which could result in seawater intrusion coming all the way up from the San Francisco Bay into the Stockton area. That's where the water gets taken in for the beginning of the State Water Project. The State Water Project cannot handle salt water, period. Can't. And if the intake is salt water, they'll turn off the project. That means all the water coming down through the Central Valley and all the way into Southern California is offline. How long? I don't know. Could be a year, could be 2 years. That's pretty shocking when you think about that impact that we're relying on from Northern California to serve the central and southern parts of California. So having emergency supplies, and something Irvine Ranch Water District has done in partnerships, but it really kind of almost mimicking what has happened, is purposefully storing water in the Central Valley, more at the southern end of it. And what we're hoping to do is that we have water stored in the ground as one retail agency, again in partnership with local agencies up there, is that we can then pull that water out, bring it into Southern California via our good friends at Metropolitan Water District, who is where MoDOC, Megan's agency, buys water from Metropolitan. So again, very complicated and interconnected, but it's the basic premise of getting water saved. So it's the wet stuff, not the paper stuff, as far as water. And then going from there. And then, of course, there's always opportunities in the future for new water. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Well, really appreciate that. And I'll just pivot from here. When I first took over as chair of natural resources and water, I remember the Republicans were doing a lot of protests at the time. Not to make this part of this an issue, but they were protesting for more money for dams and traditional infrastructure. And I remember asking Catherine actually at the time, why don't we do more of that? And she had a pretty good response for me, so I thought maybe I'd kick that back to you, Catherine, and ask, when a lot of people think about water infrastructure, they really do think about the stuff that requires concrete. So why is that not the right answer? And what are some of the other things that you would emphasize in talking about water infrastructure to address drought and supply going forward?
Is this still, okay, good, this is on. If you've been watching me, listening to Megan and Paul, you see me nodding my head a lot, because they're absolutely right. It's kind of an all of the above approach. Certainly, we know that with infrastructure, particularly the aqueducts, the California aqueduct in particular, because of subsidence, that there are transmission, if you will, problems with that now. And fortunately, over the last couple of years, the state has started to put money into repairing that, as also the folks that benefit from that do as well. But to respond specifically to Senator Min's comment, one of the things that I think has become of increasing importance is the recognition that we can store water effectively underground. And I think Paul was just talking about that in particular, storing the water in the southern San Joaquin Valley, which is, I believe, below ground, and then having access to that when you need it. For those of you who may remember, Proposition 1, which was in 2014, that had $2.7 billion set aside for water storage. Fully half of the 7 projects that have been approved by the California Water Commission were related to groundwater storage. I think we all saw last week the Sites Reservoir is potentially being fast-tracked under some of the legislation that was passed this last year. But just know that below-ground storage is equally important looking forward than above-ground storage. I think, and people here can correct me, there's something on the order of 1,500 dams here in the state of California. Most of the good places for dams and then some have already been used. And the question becomes then, sort of repairing the ones where there's seismic safety issues. In some instances, also perhaps if there's accumulated sediment, it may make sense to remove that sediment in part to restore capacity.
Thank you, Catherine. Before I move on to the next topic, there's one other elected official I did not mention, Mike Gaskins from the El Toro Water District. Mike, thank you for being here today. Appreciate it. And so our third topic is urban ecosystem accessibility and environmental health. And so if you believe, as I do, I think it's actually it's in statute, although not in the Constitution at this point, that access to clean, affordable water is a fundamental human right. Then we need policies and procedures in place to ensure that we can carry forward with that, particularly in the future. And so I'd like this panel to discuss how we can work towards equitable water distribution and better involve communities that are directly impacted by a lack of clean drinking water in the decision-making process. So David, I know this is exactly what you do. So you and your agencies, and I think a lot of your folks at UCI Water, really do look at this issue and provide crucial insights into the complex challenges that we face around equitable water management and distribution. Given your expertise in this area, I was wondering if you could shed light on the critical issues and potential solutions surrounding equity and accessibility in our current water policies. How can we better involve communities, especially those that are historically underserved or marginalized in the decision-making processes, to ensure that they have access to clean and affordable drinking water, that this is a realized right for all Californians. We all saw, of course, what happened in Flint, Michigan, and the lack of clean water there, and want to make sure that doesn't happen here. So what are some of the effective strategies or institutional reforms that we need to be thinking about in Sacramento and elsewhere to ensure that these disparities and disparate impacts are mitigated and that we can have a fair and inclusive approach to water management?
Thank you very much for that question, Senator. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to start out with an aspiration. Back in 2012, the California General Assembly passed Bill 685, which declared that every Californian has a right to clean, safe, and affordable drinking water. In 2019, Senate Bill 200 provided funding to achieve the goal to provide safe drinking water in every California community for every Californian. To monitor progress, the California EPA and the State Water Board and the Office of Environmental Health Hazards assesses the status of water quality, accessibility, and affordability across the state. Very noble, very high-minded aspiration. Let's look at the reality. In general, if you look at the state of California, and South Orange County is very much a, hopefully, exception to this, but in much of California, lower-income residents, people of color, members of underrepresented groups often face more precarious access to safe and dependable water supply, endure lower quality water, pay more as a proportion of their income for water, and undergo more hardships from climate change-induced impacts on availability. I want to discuss 4 specific challenges and then talk about some solutions. And I want to start with marginalized and underrepresented communities. Many parts of the state, particularly parts of the Central Valley, as we know, the Inland Empire, residents are served by small water utility systems that are oftentimes less able to upgrade their water supply, delivery, and wastewater treatment infrastructure and services. According to the State Water Board and the California Legislative Analyst's Office, in any given year, some 400 or so water systems throughout the state can be classified as failed systems. That's a very harsh description, but it's a valid one. We define those as systems that are unable to meet federal and state drinking water standards. Why? Well, in part because small water systems have a smaller ratepayer base. They're often undercapitalized, and as a result, they are unable to afford upgrades that are needed. And by small, I want to define that a little bit. The Water Board defines that as 500 or fewer service connections. So this is true especially in many parts of rural California and our agricultural regions. The smaller a system's base, the less able they are to afford upgrades. And even if they can apply for one-time grants of various sorts, they often lack the technical resources to apply for them without external help. Second challenge is land use decisions in water. Paul and Megan have spoken in part to this, but I want to amplify. Historically in California, we've pursued what Norris Hundley, a distinguished historian for many years at UCLA, called a hydraulic commonwealth. In effect, engineering our physical environment to meet the water supply and flood alleviation needs of cities. These activities were very much needed, and they were very much successful. They made it possible to support 40 million people, and they also transformed California into the world's 5th largest economy. What did we do? Well, we altered urban rivers and streams for flood alleviation. We diverted water from great distances to support growing cities. And we paved and created impervious surfaces to expand the footprint of cities. These past practices were successful, and they did a lot of good things, but they also caused a number of problems. Rivers no longer function in many cases as naturally, hydrologically robust systems. Long-distance diversion has now become a limited option in California, we know, in part because of climate change and declines in stream flow. We see this certainly in the Colorado Basin. Disputes within various parties within basins have also hastened our rethinking of how much water we can divert. And impervious surfaces, as we expanded our urban footprints, have in some instances worsened urban floods and worsened non-point or runoff pollution into estuaries. Which brings me to a third point, and that is water-smart urban planning and development. The good news is that in the past 30 years or so, we have begun, these two agencies are leaders in this, to adopt a new paradigm, one that adaptively manages our water in light of a changing climate and seeks to rectify past practices. A one water approach that considers water supply, ecosystem health, and minimizing hazards into a unified management approach. A key component are things like greater adoption of water-smart development and green infrastructure to permit groundwater basin recharge and to lessen pollution. There are, of course, challenges in this. For one thing, capturing excess rainwater may unintentionally disrupt local watershed processes. So we have to be cognizant of this. In addition, end uses, Paul noted this, are important. We have to make sure that we're using this water fit for purpose. If it's for potable uses, we're going to have to treat it, and that's an added cost. If it's for non-potable uses, for landscaping and parks, those can be cost-effective substitutes for potable water use. So these are things that have to be considered. And lastly, public acceptance in green infrastructure. Green infrastructure has a different appearance from what many people might be accustomed to. Planning, zoning, and community covenants need to be negotiated to make sure that people can accept this green infrastructure in their backyards. And then I want to mention, fourthly, historical disparities, particularly equity, accessibility, and community engagement. Affordability remains an environmental justice challenge in many parts of California. State Water Board estimates that a fifth of the state's water systems, serving some 20% of its residents, have water rates that are unaffordable for basic needs. Now think about that. This is 2023. We're talking about water for cooking, washing, drinking. And some 34% of all households earning less than 200% federal poverty level are in need of some kind of rate assistance. As There's a collateral problem I want to briefly touch upon. Over-reliance on bottled water. If you live in a rural district in which your water system is failed because it's contaminated by agricultural pesticides or fertilizers, or limited by climate change imposed limits on supply, you may in fact rely heavily on bottled water. None of us are opposed to bottled water, but consider bottled water is considerably more expensive than tap water, and it also poses certain health risks, particularly for children. It's non-fluoridated. So we have to be very, very careful about using this as a primary water supply source. And I also want to note that from an environmental equity standpoint, Latinos, African Americans, Asian Americans tends to rely much more heavily on bottled water than other members of our population. There is an inequity here. Part of that is also caused by the way bottled water is marketing to those who do not trust the quality of tap water. So, what about some solutions? What can we do going forward to basically change this trajectory and make sure that all Californians, in fact, have a right to clean water? Well, one thing we could do is better involve underserved communities by supporting the recruitment of underrepresented groups on water agency boards and on other governance bodies that have a role in water resources management. There are, in fact, groups in California, such as the Association of California Water Agencies, which has initiated a working committee to foster greater diversity in the water workforce. There are other minority-focused groups, such as Water Education for Latino Leaders and African American Water Education Foundation, which has promoted these initiatives. And this is something that we've studied in my center, and I think this is a very hopeful direction for making a more diverse and inclusive workforce and trained underrepresented groups to be better involved. A second solution is pursuing innovative financing options as a reform. There are various financing options that are available to assist low-income communities faced with failed or near-failing systems. There is a safe and affordable funding for Equity and Resilience Fund, as well as a Safe Drinking Water Fund operated by the state. These legislations are designed to help water systems provide an adequate and affordable supply of safe drinking water in both the near and long term for operations and maintenance, system consolidations, emergency water supplies, and other uses. But again, the technical support to apply for these funds is very much needed by underrepresented communities. And then let me mention two other solutions. We often talk about taking small water systems and inducing or compelling them to consolidate in order to overcome problems plaguing smaller underfinanced agencies. In pursuing acquisition and consolidation, we want to be careful to do this sensibly and sensitively. If consolidation is sought, we want to make sure that consideration is paid to ensuring that water district boundary changes don't generate ratepayer burdens on certain groups. We also want to make sure that disruptions in service do not arise as a result of these consolidations. And we want to make sure that equitable representation for various parts of the consolidated district are ensured. We could use bodies such as the state's local area formation commissions to help in thinking about creative ways of encouraging consolidation and acquisition. Last, I want to make sure that we encompass the needs of tribal nations. There are a number of outstanding concerns in California that remain unaddressed or not sufficiently addressed in places like the Coachella Valley and even parts of the Owens Valley. Way back in the 19th century, tribal nations were displaced by settlers who sanctioned the diverting of water from streams for farming, livestock, and domestic needs, and this hastened a culture of exclusion. Today, the State Water Resources Board and the Department of Water Resources mandate and prescribe consultation and coordination with tribal nations. But one thing that is very important and a recent concern is that tribal rights in sustainably managing what they call sacred waters may be threatened by various efforts in managing climate variability, drought, and off-stream diversion. So special care needs to be taken. In short, summing up, our priority should be to end social, economic, and other barriers to safe water access for all Californians. Starting point is to engage community groups, to be cognizant of their perceptions, prepared to respond to any and all of their concerns, and ensure that the public reposes trust and confidence in management of our water systems.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. A lot to unpack there. Very helpful. And you mentioned as part of your comments that this tension between deploying clean water and providing clean water and maybe some of the environmental trade-offs there. That has certainly been a central concern of the legislatures. That's a timely transition to our last topic, legislative update on the upcoming climate bond. This past year, you may recall that the governor introduced his ambitious climate infrastructure package as part of a budget trailer bill process. And our committee was among the key committees that heard parts of that climate infrastructure package. And we certainly saw those tensions, not just between clean drinking water, but between clean energy deployment and infrastructure deployment generally, and the concerns around wildlife preservation, open space preservation, and preserving our beautiful natural habitats. So with that, Catherine Moore, my final question here is related to this. We've got a climate bond maybe coming before us this coming year. We've got a lot of moving parts up ahead of us. You are the staff director of the Natural Resources and Water Committee, and that gives you a unique vantage point on what's going on in the legislature related to our environmental and water policies. So I wanted to see if you could discuss some of the impacts of the bills that passed last year, as well as what we might expect going forward in the coming year, including around this climate bond proposal that's coming to a head. So what are some of the opportunities you see in front of us? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the impacts of what we've done and what we might do going forward?
Piece of cake, right?
Yeah, easy stuff.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with the probably arcane legislative committee jurisdiction requirements and rules, the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee has jurisdiction over water supply, so my remarks are going to focus on that. That doesn't mean water quality, as some of the other panelists have mentioned, isn't critically important, but not something within our committee's jurisdiction. Starting with legislation other than the climate bond, one of the key bills that passed this year, and I should say that water supply legislation is uniformly controversial. If you can get all sides to actually support a bill, it means the bill doesn't really do very much. Just to be frank with you. So I have legislative staff, so what I'm saying is just my opinion. It certainly doesn't reflect a member of the legislature or Senator Met. But one of the key bills that did pass this year was a bill by Senator Allen, SB 389. Senator Allen, as you may know, represents part of the west side of Los Angeles. And it authorizes the State Water Resources Control Board to investigate water rights for all the different water rights holders, and it gives them additional authority than they already enjoy. Very controversial, barely passed, but was signed by the governor and will become law. One of the other bills that wasn't really totally part of the infrastructure package that Senator Min just mentioned, but was also passed through the budget, was a drought and flood trailer bill. I think Paul already mentioned that there were concerns about some of the floodwaters from this last winter not being able to be recaptured and used to replenish groundwater, going to recharge basins to do that. The governor had an executive order to try and streamline permitting, and the drought and flood trailer bill was actually statutory language that became part of what becomes state law on January 1st, that sought to codify some of the streamlining to make sure that if there's permits that have to be issued to capture these excess flows, that those permits are waived or streamlined to help, going forward at least, make sure that those waters are captured. Senator Min also mentioned the green infrastructure package. This was a series of 5 bills that sought to also, again, streamline infrastructure, make sure that with some of the federal monies that are available through the Inflation Reduction Act as well as the IIJA, that California's got the matching funds to make sure that we don't let any money, federal money that's available, go to waste. And I should mention that while the green infrastructure package applied to infrastructure separate from water, water supply was certainly a key component of that. There are a couple of bills still pending in the legislature related to water. There's a couple, certainly from Assemblymember Bennett, who represents part of Ventura County, related to the permitting of groundwater wells and also the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Assemblymember Bauer Can has a bill that would authorize the Water Board to issue an interim relief order and to increase penalties for violations. That's a direct response to an incident up in Shasta County. And then Assemblymember Webb's AB 1337 authorizes the State Water Resources Control Board to issue curtailment orders. It is a direct response to some recent appeals court's decisions that said the State Water Resources Control Board, in using a particular method, could not actually curtail the rights of certain water rights holders. And of course, they would be using that authority in a drought, when it's a flood. When we get to January, there'll be 2,000 more bills or so introduced, so that's just a flavor of some of the controversial ones that are out there. We'll see what happens. Now, specific to the climate bond, there are 4 bonds currently active in the general resources, water supply, climate resilience, wildfire response world. The 2 you're probably most familiar with are Senator Allen's SB 867 and Assemblymember Garcia's AB 1567. Between them, they both total about somewhere between $15.5 to $16 billion of bonds, or the projects that are authorized within them. Senator Eggman and Assemblymember Villapadua have smaller bonds of $4 to $6 billion each, really focused on flood protection. In actuality, given what is likely to be an uncertain economic climate and how much bonding capacity is available, that $16 billion is going to get knocked down. We don't know yet what that's going to be, but it's going to be less than it is now. The good news is that certainly, at least right now in the Allen bond, the largest single category is water supply, and that includes things like dam repair to address seismic safety, among other things. To talk specifically about some of the issues that Dave mentioned, certainly a focus of the bond is to ensure that funds available there are targeted at disadvantaged and severely disadvantaged communities. The tribes are also specifically addressed, as is trying to ensure emphasis. So for smaller organizations that are interested, that advance payments are possible, and that the sort of technical assistance they would need to have a successful bond application, a successful grant application for bond monies would be there too. But again, I would just emphasize we don't really know. For those of you who represent water districts or other advocacy groups, I would certainly encourage you, because any bond that is being considered now is going to go on the November 2024 ballot, so basically the presidential election. That has to be completed by sort of late May, early June, to not run into certain costs associated with getting it on and in all the ballot materials. I would encourage you to reach out to your elected official.
That would be
Senator,
me.
But also leadership in the Senate. Certainly the governor's office as well. The governor will have a role in this too. But make sure people know what you're looking for and asking for. And even if you've already done it, weigh it again. I cannot emphasize enough. I think that my fellow panelists have talked about communication already, but reach out and keep doing it and make sure everybody knows what is being sought, because that's how you make sure you end up in the conversation, at midnight at the last week of May when all of this works out. Just one thing I have to point out, I guess, because I'm a little bit of a nerd, but keep in mind with the bond, those are capital projects that operations and maintenance, aren't the sort of thing that can be paid for with a bond. Ideally, whatever it's going to be paid for with it will last for the length of the bond. And with that, I think I will stop.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that. And before we move to questions, I just want to add briefly to what you just said. There's a group of, 5 of us, that are part of the working group on the bond. So I am not only your senator, but I'm one of a few people that are really taking part in these discussions. And I'll just say that a lot of the trade-offs we discussed earlier are also trade-offs we're discussing within this bond discussion. What should be in the bond? Part of that's going to be around polling. We're going to poll this and see what's politically popular, because we need people to actually vote for this bond at the end of the day. The size of the bond, as Catherine mentioned, is going to be something that's up to debate. The governor has prioritized mental health services for another bond. There may be an education bond. So within the $16 billion or $14 billion that Catherine mentioned, there's other priorities that are going to take some of that away. So we're talking about a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. That being said, one of the things I have emphasized as a member of this working group is that we should not be redundant of federal or funding or private capital. There's a lot of clean energy funding out there. I'm a big advocate of clean energy deployment, but we know there's a ton of federal funding out there. There's a lot of private capital out there for clean energy deployment. There's not a lot of funding out there for water. So without sounding like I'm pandering to you water folks, we have been prioritizing water. We'll continue to do so, but to reiterate Catherine's point, to the extent you're able to give us specific projects, talking points, etc., that is always helpful. With that, I'd love to open it up now to Q&A. I want to give a big thanks to, let's give a round of applause for We've got a mic going around there, so the gentleman in the gray suit back there, if you don't mind identifying yourself and then asking your question, that'd be great.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for an excellent panel. Thank you for being here from Senator Min. My name is Chuck Gibson. I'm an elected director on the Santa Margarita Water District. I'm also the chairman of Region 10, the Association of California Water Agencies, which is San Diego branch. However, my question is being offered on behalf of myself, so I don't purport to represent the views of either of those organizations. However, my question has to do with water rights and validation of water rights, as well as the relationship to unfunded state mandates. When you talk about abrogation of the state's enforcement ability, we also have to talk about the rights people have to water. So my question to you from a state standpoint is, what rights do local districts have to wastewater? We are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in recycling water when we have plants that are threatened to be curtailed because of shortages of water. So that people, because they're putting limits on the amount of water people can use. So that's a question. The other thing is, I have a shocking quote from the State Commission on Unfunded Mandates from 2019. And I doubt that very many people are aware of this, but it points out a problem we have in the state administration. And I want to ask the state legislature what they're doing for oversight to try to get the state to coordinate the various boards and commissions so that they're focused on the challenges we have in water. which means coordination of systems. We have a state mandated, unfunded mandated commission saying the following: provision of drinking water through a public water system is fundamentally distinct from the essential and peculiarly governmental functions determined by the courts, providing water service for a fee. Traditionally, a proprietary function to ratepayers is far different from a city or county providing police or fire protection, or school districts providing a free and
You
appropriate
need to put the mic a little closer to your mouth.
public education to all residents of the jurisdiction regardless of their ability to pay.
I'm sorry, do you mind just clarifying what the unfunded mandate is?
It's led in schools. The school districts.
Oh, led in schools, okay.
In 2018, went to the commission and asked for funding of the mandate. The commission on mandates denied it because they said essentially water is not a state, requirement to provide. So it's, we don't have to fund that mandate. There's any number of decisions that this state commission, who was designed to try to help local government, has deterred the funding of unfunded state mandates so that the legislature, as well as the governor and other governmental agencies in the state, and then require local governments.
I think I got your question, and just for the purposes of limited time, I'll cut you off. And just to make sure I'm clarifying your question correctly, I think you first referred to the rights to wastewater, and with that I think you're referring to the sort of dual-sided nature of the fact that we have limitations on consumption combined with those districts, including some that are out here that recycle quite a lot of water, and that creates tensions. Is that what you're referring to? The first question. The second question was unfunded mandates generally, but specifically around lead in schools. Is that?
Right, but it's an example before you make it.
Understood, yeah, I understood. So with that, I'll quickly answer and then open it up to you. I've only been in office since 2020, so this 2021, December 2020. So this predates my time. Certainly the question of unfunded mandates is one that is something that we're often accused of in Sacramento. And I'll just say that running a state of 39 million people is challenging. And so this is the first time this particular decision has been brought to my attention. I'd be happy to look into it. I can't promise you we'll do anything about it, but anytime we make decisions at the state level, they impact everybody equally, and that is a ongoing challenge that I've found in my time in the legislature on finding that right balance between local control and state mandates is an important one. On the first question, similarly, trying to figure out what the right approaches are, and I think you heard allusions to this from several of our panelists that we do think that, I believe that consumption has to be part of this. Efficient consumption has to be part of the solution as well. Making sure that we don't also have unintended consequences, which is what you're talking about here, I think is an important policy-making tool as well. Information's good. So now I know this. Unfortunately, this predated me, a lot of this, but I have heard that same problem brought to my attention before. As someone who represents Orange County, who is now chair of Natural Resources and Water, I'd like to try to follow through in representing my districts. Again, one of the challenges is we have so many water districts, so many Californians, that trying to find, one, just making sure we understand all the problems out there is crucial, but then also making sure we can act in ways that are efficient or useful. But with that, I'd just love to open it. You guys have the resources and expertise.
I'm glad the leader of our panel was a lawyer, because that's the thorniest question I can think of right now in water has to do with the rights issue, and I'm not a lawyer, but peeling back the rights issue, it's water. I said earlier, it's an emotional issue, but water rights, it's an ownership, it's a property right. I mean, keep nodding, I'll keep looking over there, so I don't get thrown out of class. But you can't just take away property right. But in the course of talking about it, it is very emotional. And how those who have the right were being told, stop it, we're going to take that away, I work a lot with farmers in the Central Valley, and I'm not paraphrasing when I say over my dead body, because that's kind of the conversation, if you can call it that, that's going on. So that's got to be done very thoughtfully, and if you don't like the system, change it, like Senator Demin does. He went to Sacramento for a reason. I mean, the courts are there to enforce what's in place. Based on tradition and everything else, and the governor signs or doesn't sign what's put in front of him, but that's where it's going to happen. Well, what's happening in the meantime, and something that made me think of this when Dr. Feldman was talking, was all these great new programs. We talk about affordability and new infrastructure and everything else. Every time the next We use the term acre feet when we measure water and talk about bigger quantities of water. Every time another acre foot of water gets developed, the cheapest water supplies are taken care of, are already accounted for. Those are being utilized. So the next one's going to be more expensive. The next one's going to be more expensive. Eventually we'll get to things like ocean desalination, which is kind of the bottomless pit / most expensive form of water, at least current technology. Great. So we're here in Southern California serving residences, primarily businesses. And I was in a room full of general managers, and some from ag, some from urban. And I asked my friends who serve the ag community, well, how much will you pay for water? And they thought about it, and it has to do with the market, and what can their customers sell almonds for, cotton, and whatever crop they're growing. And I said, well, we'll pay anything, because we're urban. We'll pay literally anything for water if we had to. So that's a juxtaposition of farmers being priced out. We can keep bringing on new projects. We can keep passing those costs along to our customers and turning the affordability upside down. But in the meantime, we're putting farmers out of business who grow our food. And that's the thorniness of this transfer issue and this rights issue and everything else that's been going on that I don't have an answer to. But the answer is not one thing. It's not just build more stuff. Unless we find a pile of money, again, we were blessed the last time around, and we were able to turn that into some new water projects from the feds in the state. But it has to be done with efficiency. I have seen, and the farmers I work with are being much more efficient. They do realize what they have is extremely valuable, but it's also precarious. That could just be taken away. So those who have those agricultural rights are willing to let some of that go. But you're challenging a person's livelihood, their absolute livelihood, when you talk about taking away their water if they're in the agricultural business. So it's a tough one. Yeah, very tough.
May, did you have any comments?
I was going to talk a little bit more about the unintended consequences, and I think I was going to say this in my wrap-up, but since we're getting close on time, I'll just share now. I think oftentimes when we talk about water use efficiency and water reliability and water supply, we think in terms of them and water districts and big entities, and I see a pretty diverse crowd and a lot of water family, but also those who may not live, breathe, and drink and think water all day long. And it's important to remember we're all stewards of water every single day. So when you're using water, when you see a running toilet or when you hear a running toilet or you see a leaky faucet, you have an ability to influence fixing water infrastructure within the own buildings that you occupy. Whether you're renting or owning or all of that, you are a manager of water resources. And so there are things that we can do in our daily lives at home. And there's a Korean proverb that I love that basically says even dust accumulates to become a mountain. And so we've shown that. We've increased our population in Orange County by over 1.2 million people since the 1990s, and we use less water than we did then. And so we have shown that these little things that may seem like a drop in the bucket, when we collectively take responsibility and take action, can make big impacts. At the same time, I think it's important to acknowledge that through a lot of different policies and through a lot of different changes, we have increased our water use efficiency indoors significantly. However, we do have a lot of opportunity outdoors. And that water use outdoors cannot get recycled, right? And so any overspray from your outdoor irrigation, any runoff, that does not get captured at our wastewater treatment plants for recycling. And so every drop that we save outdoors does not have that unintended consequence of influencing our recycled water supply and helps minimize our water waste. And I think sometimes we go immediately to the extreme of I have to transform my entire landscape or I have to pull everything out. But even just reducing overwatering can have a significant impact. And the EPA says about 50 to 60% of outdoor watering is overwatering. And about 60 to 80% of residential water use here in Orange County is outdoor water use. And so we can make a big impact just by reducing overwatering. And that could be everything from checking your sprinkler heads. I won't test to see how many of you have actually checked your sprinkler systems in the last here, a handful of you. But that's aging infrastructure too. Our plumbing inside our homes and our plumbing outside of our homes, our irrigation systems. That is all aging infrastructure that unfortunately most homeowners and property owners neglect. And so we have deferred maintenance within our own confines of our own homes that we can also have a meaningful impact on. And so that would be my encouragement, is to really think about what can you do, inform and educate. There's so many resources out there, whether it's from us at MODOC, whether it's from Irvine Ranch Water District or your local water district, and understanding how you can help make an influence and then how you can use that to drive conversations that can make an influence.
Great, thank you so much, and we're way over time, so I'm gonna limit this to one more question, and then I'm gonna ask you to close briefly in a minute or less, and brevity is the soul of wit. With that, any questions here? I'll let James decide who to take here.
Oh gosh, put it on me.
Yeah, someone on this side. You have a few hands up.
I'll go straight.
Okay.
Senator, thank you for bringing this discussion to the amazing UCI campus today.
You want to identify yourself in the audience, please?
My name is Thomas Watts.
If you don't know him already.
I have a question. We've talked about short-term solutions, but long-term solutions, viable ones like taking water out of the atmosphere, which is used around the world, not so much here in this country, but what are some of the long-term solutions that we can have for the next 25 to 50 years?
Okay, very briefly, all your thoughts in 30 seconds or less. If each of you want to go down and say what you think in response to Thomas.
Well, I'll go first because I'll take the easy one, storage, and I mean surface and groundwater. And I'll say groundwater slowly and eloquently because I think that's very, very untapped, is groundwater storage.
I'm going to say it's an all of the above approach. There is not a one size fits all silver bullet, and that's why the reliability study and looking at a diversified portfolio, including water use efficiency, is important.
Rainwater harvesting, more recycling of wastewater, conservation, or end-use efficiencies. And I would also say for all of these things, bear in mind that they're not technical problems any longer. They're not problems of economics, affordability, alleviating any risks that may be associated with these technologies, and public acceptability and public buy-in. Those are the keys.
Catherine?
Just engineer hat on, if you're gonna do atmospheric harvesting, you need the right conditions. And those can be very, very few and far between.
Cool, very innovative. Okay, with that, thank you very much and I apologize we didn't have more time for Q&A, but I'd love to give the panelists an opportunity to briefly close, and if brief could be great. That we're 12:26 right now, so you guys could keep it short, that'd be amazing. But let's start with Catherine, since you've been going last all day.
Well, again, just thank you for the invitation to be down here. If any of you want to follow up with me or any other member of the staff of the Resources Committee, you can find us all on our website. And I would just emphasize again, with respect to the climate bond, if there are specific asks or priorities, make sure you tell your elected representatives early and often. And I would just like to correct myself. I said that the drought and budget trailer bill is going to go into effect January 1st. No, it's already in effect.
I just want to say in closing that I think there's a tendency in our society often to think of command and control solutions as being the best options. And I'd like to make a pitch for markets and economic incentives. I think it covers two of the issues that we talked about this morning. Water rights. Within our existing water rights systems, we can make them more efficient by buying, selling, leasing water rights, moving them from lower valued uses to higher valued uses. Those are ways that in fact have proven to work even for protecting in-stream flow. A number of organizations in California and throughout the West are doing that. Also economic incentives with respect to conservation and end-use efficiency. Water rights structures that reward people for using water more efficiently and using less of it. And if we want to use the phrase penalize for excessive use. Markets or economic incentives.
Thank you, Professor.
I just want to thank everyone for your time. There are a lot of resources available on our website, and if anyone has any questions, I'm always available to help.
I'll echo Megan's thank you, and also say I hope you enjoyed the water. I'm assuming it was filled from the tap today. Some of Irvine's finest, and if you love it, please tell Director Steve Lamar here at the Irvine Ranch Water District Board how great the water is. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Let's give thank you all for being here. This would have been a very bad panel if we didn't have an audience, so really appreciate you all for showing up today. Panelists, we have to take a picture. That's your price of admission. You're going to take one with me. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for our experts, and also give a shout out to our staff for organizing. Thank you.